The federal courtroom fell into stunned silence as Judge Amy Berman Jackson's gavel crashed down with unusual force. The sound reverberated through the wood-paneled chamber like a gunshot, causing even the veteran court reporters to flinch. "Mrs. Bondi, you are in contempt of court," Judge Jackson declared, her voice sharp with authority. "I am ordering the U.S. Marshals to take you into custody immediately." Pamela Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida, stood calmly at the defense table, her blonde hair framing a face that betrayed no fear despite the judge's shocking declaration. As two U.S. Marshals approached, moving hesitantly toward the accomplished attorney, Bondi raised her hand slightly. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. "Before you make a decision you'll regret, I believe you should review these documents." Bondi's assistant rushed forward, placing a sealed folder on the judge's bench. The spectators watched in tense silence as Judge Jackson, known for her tough rulings against high-profile political figures, narrowed her eyes at Bondi before reluctantly reaching for the folder. What happened in the next 10 minutes would not only reverse the judge's decision, but send shockwaves through the entire judicial system. No one in that courtroom could have predicted how quickly the power would shift, or what Pam Bondi had discovered that would make even the formidable Judge Amy Berman Jackson back down. Before we reveal what was in those documents, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic courtroom showdowns that change the course of American justice. Judge Amy Berman Jackson had built her reputation on being uncompromising. At 69, the Obama appointee to the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia had presided over some of the most contentious political cases of the past decade. Her stern demeanor and refusal to tolerate any disruption in her courtroom had earned her both admiration and criticism. Legal analysts often described her as meticulous and by the book, while her critics called her agenda-driven and unnecessarily harsh. Today's hearing had already been tense from the moment it began. The case involved allegations of prosecutorial misconduct in a high-profile political investigation, and Pam Bondi was representing a defendant who claimed evidence had been deliberately withheld by the Department of Justice. Bondi, 58, was no stranger to high-stakes legal battles. As Florida's first female attorney general, she had tackled everything from healthcare legislation to drug trafficking. After leaving office, she had built a reputation as a formidable defense attorney who specialized in cases involving government overreach. Known for her methodical preparation and strategic thinking, Bondi rarely entered a courtroom without a contingency plan. The gallery was packed with journalists, legal observers, and members of the public, all sensing that this hearing might become newsworthy. What they hadn't anticipated was just how dramatic it would become. The conflict had escalated when Bondi had questioned the integrity of the prosecution's evidence handling. Judge Jackson had warned her twice about her tone and allegations, but Bondi had persisted, suggesting that certain documents had been deliberately kept from the defense. "Ms. Bondi, these are serious accusations you're making against the prosecution," Judge Jackson had said, irritation evident in her voice. "Unless you have concrete evidence to support these claims, I will not allow you to continue with this line of argument." Bondi had responded calmly, "Your Honor, we have reason to believe that exculpatory evidence was deliberately withheld from discovery. If the court would allow me to present our findings—" "You've made these allegations repeatedly, Ms. Bondi," Judge Jackson interrupted. "Yet you've provided nothing substantial to support them. This courtroom is not a venue for political theater or unfounded accusations against the Department of Justice." "With all due respect, Your Honor," Bondi replied, her voice firm, "this isn't political theater. This is about justice and due process for my client." Judge Jackson's patience had visibly thinned. "Ms. Bondi, I've heard enough. Your comments are bordering on contempt. Your Honor, if seeking the truth is contempt, then perhaps the standard for contempt needs examination," Bondi had responded, causing gasps throughout the courtroom. It was this final comment that had pushed Judge Jackson over the edge, leading to her contempt ruling and the order for Bondi's immediate detention. Now, as the judge opened the mysterious folder Bondi had provided, the stakes couldn't have been higher. If Bondi was bluffing, her career and reputation would suffer irreparable damage. If Judge Jackson dismissed legitimate evidence, it could undermine the entire case and possibly her judicial standing. The entire courtroom held its breath as Judge Jackson began reviewing the contents, her expression changing from dismissive to concerned with each passing moment. Judge Jackson's eyes widened slightly as she examined the first document in the folder. She glanced up at Bondi, who remained standing beside the U.S. Marshals, her posture relaxed despite the threat of imminent detention. "Where did you obtain these documents, Ms. Bondi?" Judge Jackson asked, her voice lower than before. "They were provided to us by a whistleblower within the DOJ last night, Your Honor," Bondi replied. "As you can see from the authentication markers and electronic timestamps, they are unaltered internal communications." The lead prosecutor, James Harrington, rose quickly from his seat. "Your Honor, we have no knowledge of these alleged documents. The prosecution demands an opportunity to review whatever Ms. Bondi is presenting before the court proceeds." "Judge." Jackson held up her hand to silence him. "You'll have your chance, Mr. Harrington. For now, I'm reviewing these materials myself." The tension in the courtroom intensified as Judge Jackson continued reading, occasionally making notes. The prosecutors whispered urgently among themselves while Bondi's client, a former government official charged with obstruction of justice, sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the judge. After several minutes, Judge Jackson addressed the court reporter. "Let the record show that I am reviewing documents presented by defense counsel that appear to be internal Department of Justice emails and memoranda related to evidence in this case." Harrington stood again. "Your Honor, without knowing the source of these alleged documents, the prosecution objects to their consideration. They may be fabricated or obtained illegally." "Mr. Harrington," Judge Jackson responded sharply, "these documents bear official DOJ watermarks and appear to be from the Department's secure internal communication system. Are you suggesting that Ms. Bondi or her team fabricated Department of Justice watermarked documents?" "No, Your Honor, but—" "Then please be seated while I continue my review." The courtroom fell silent again as Judge Jackson turned to the next set of documents. Her expression darkened visibly. "Mr. Harrington," she said after several tense moments, "these emails appear to show members of your prosecution team discussing the deliberate withholding of certain witness statements from discovery. Can you explain this?" Harrington paled. "Your Honor, without seeing the specific emails, I cannot comment on their content or context." "Let me read one for you then," Judge Jackson said, her voice now controlled but cold. "Hammond's testimony contradicts our timeline. If we include it in discovery, the defense will use it to undermine our entire case. Recommend we classify. It is non-relevant to discovery requirements. This email is dated 3 months ago and copied to your department email, Mr. Harrington." Murmurs swept through the courtroom. Bondi remained silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. Harrington stood again, visibly flustered. "Your Honor, if such an email exists, it was clearly discussing a legal determination about relevance, not suggesting improper withholding of evidence." "Is that so?" Judge Jackson replied. "Then how do you explain the response, also copied to you?" "Agreed. File Hammond's statement separately from the main evidence. Mark it as internal work product to shield it from discovery requirements. Mr. Harrington, are you familiar with Brady v. Maryland?" "Of course, Your Honor," Harrington replied stiffly. "Then you're aware that the prosecution is legally obligated to disclose evidence that might exonerate the defendant. These emails suggest a deliberate strategy to circumvent that obligation." The two U.S. Marshals who had approached Bondi earlier now stood awkwardly, unsure whether to proceed with a contempt order given the unfolding revelations. Judge Jackson turned to the next document, and her expression changed again this time to something closer to shock. She looked directly at Harrington. This document appears to be a sworn statement from Thomas Hammond, a key witness in this case, directly contradicting the timeline presented in your opening arguments. According to your own filing system number visible on this document, it was in your possession 6 months ago, yet it appears nowhere in the discovery materials provided to the defense. Harrington began to respond, but Judge Jackson wasn't finished. Even more concerning, Mr. Harrington, is this email from you personally, instructing your team to, and I quote, ensure Hammond understands the importance of consistency with our established timeline before his testimony. Would you care to explain what you meant by that? The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. One of the junior prosecutors at Harrington's table put his head in his hands. Bondi finally spoke. Your Honor, there are 17 more examples of withheld exculpatory evidence outlined in the remaining documents. Given what we've uncovered, we move for immediate dismissal of all charges against my client and request a formal investigation into prosecutorial misconduct. Judge Jackson set the documents down and looked directly at the U.S. Marshal still standing near Bondi. Gentlemen, you may return to your stations. The contempt order is rescinded. The escalation had reached its peak. What had begun as Bondi, facing jail for contempt, had transformed into serious allegations against the prosecution team itself. And Judge Jackson, known for her by-the-book approach, now faced a critical decision that could affect not just this case, but her own legacy on the bench. Judge Amy Berman Jackson removed her reading glasses and set them carefully on the bench. The courtroom remained absolutely silent, all eyes fixed on her as she straightened the papers in Bondi's folder and closed it deliberately. The court will take a 30-minute recess, she announced. Mr. Harrington, I expect you and your entire team to remain in the building. Ms. Bondi, you and your client will also stay. Court is in recess. The gavel struck again, and Judge Jackson rose swiftly, exiting through the door behind the bench. As soon as she disappeared, the courtroom erupted into a buzz of urgent whispers and hurried movements. Journalists rushed out to file initial reports on the dramatic turn of events. Precisely 30 minutes later, Judge Jackson returned to the courtroom, which had quickly refilled to capacity, with additional spectators crowding the back wall. The tension was palpable as she took her seat and surveyed the room with a grave expression. Before I address the serious matters before us, she began, I want to make something perfectly clear. This court's primary obligation is to justice and the rule of law, not to any political agenda, not to any individual, and certainly not to protecting the reputation of any institution, including this court. She turned her attention to Bondi. Ms. Bondi, I owe you an apology. My contempt order was issued hastily and without proper consideration of your claims. As officers of the court, attorneys have not just the right but the duty to zealously advocate for their clients, especially when there are concerns about procedural fairness. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the courtroom. Judge Jackson was known for many things, but public apologies were not among them. She continued, however, the manner in which you presented your accusations, without prior notice to the court, about this evidence, created an unnecessarily confrontational situation. In the future, I would expect such serious allegations to be presented through proper channels. Bondi nodded respectfully. Understood, Your Honor. The timing of our receipt of these documents presented unusual circumstances. Judge Jackson then shifted her focus to the prosecution table, where Harrington sat ashen-faced beside his team. Mr. Harrington, the documents, presented by the defense, contain extremely troubling evidence of what appears to be deliberate prosecutorial misconduct. The withholding of exculpatory evidence is among the most serious breaches of prosecutorial duty. Harrington stood slowly. Your Honor, if I may? You may not, Mr. Harrington, not yet. Judge Jackson's voice was steel. I have reviewed these documents thoroughly during the recess and consulted with the Chief Judge. Based on the evidence before me, I am taking the following actions immediately. She held up a document she had prepared during the recess. First, all charges against the defendant are dismissed with prejudice. The defendant closed his eyes briefly in relief, while Bondi maintained her professional composure despite the major victory. Second, I am referring this matter to the Office of Professional Responsibility at the Department of Justice for a full investigation into the conduct of the prosecution team. Harrington's shoulders slumped visibly. Third, I am ordering an independent review of all cases handled by this prosecution team over the past 5 years to determine if similar misconduct has occurred in other matters. One of the junior prosecutors audibly gasped. And finally, Judge Jackson continued, her voice now measured and deliberate, I am self-reporting to the Judicial Conduct Committee my handling of this case, including my initial dismissal of the defense's concerns and the contempt order against Ms. Bondi. This final announcement caused a shockwave through the courtroom. Even Bondi looked surprised. Your Honor, she said, rising from her seat, while we appreciate the court's reconsideration, self-reporting seems unnecessary. You corrected course. As soon as evidence was presented, Judge Jackson shook her head. Ms. Bondi, the integrity of our judicial system depends on accountability at all levels. If I demand it from the prosecution, I must demonstrate it myself. She addressed the entire courtroom. What we have witnessed today is both a failure and a correction of our system of justice. The failure lies in the apparent misconduct that nearly resulted in an unjust prosecution. The correction comes through the diligent work of defense counsel and the system's capacity, though sometimes delayed, to right its own wrongs. Turning back to Bondi, Judge Jackson added, Ms. Bondi, the court acknowledges that without your persistence and the evidence you obtained, a serious miscarriage of justice might have occurred today. While I don't condone the confrontational approach, I cannot dispute the importance of the outcome. Bondi nodded again. Thank you, Your Honor. The defense appreciates the court's reconsideration and decisive action. In a final, unexpected move, Judge Jackson addressed the U.S. Marshals who had nearly taken Bondi into custody earlier. Gentlemen, thank you for your restraint and professionalism today. It serves as a reminder that even when carrying out orders, measured judgment remains essential. With that, Judge Jackson brought down her gavel one final time. This case is dismissed. Court is adjourned. As spectators and journalists rushed from the courtroom to spread news of the dramatic reversal, Pam Bondi calmly gathered her documents. She had entered the courtroom facing potential detention and left having exposed serious misconduct, secured her client's freedom, and earned the respect of one of the nation's toughest judges. It was a victory not just for her client, but for the principles of due process and the pursuit of truth. Principles that Bondi had risked her freedom to defend. By nightfall, the courthouse drama had exploded across every major news network and online platform. Video clips of Judge Jackson rescinding her contempt order and dismissing the case spread virally, with Dowland Bondi v. Jackson and Justice Restored trending nationwide. Legal analysts on television panels dissected every moment of the remarkable hearing. On one major network, a former federal prosecutor explained the significance. What we witnessed today was extraordinary on multiple levels. Judge Jackson is known for running a tight ship and rarely backs down. For her to not only reverse a contempt order, but dismiss the entire case and refer the prosecution for investigation, that speaks to the severity of what Bondi uncovered. The political implications were equally seismic. The case had been viewed by many as politically motivated from the start, and Bondi's triumph reinforced concerns about weaponization of the justice system. Conservative commentators praised Bondi's courage, while even liberal legal scholars acknowledged the importance of exposing prosecutorial misconduct, regardless of political alignment. The system worked today, noted a prominent civil liberties attorney on a cable news panel. Not initially, but eventually. And that's the key takeaway. Justice requires vigilance, and often, as we saw with Pam Bondi, considerable personal risk. Within 24 hours, the Department of Justice announced the immediate reassignment of James Harrington and the formation of a special review team to examine the allegations of misconduct. The Attorney General issued a statement. The integrity of our justice system depends on prosecutors fulfilling their ethical and legal obligations. Any deliberate withholding of exculpatory evidence is unacceptable and contrary to DOJ values. We take these allegations extremely seriously. For Pam Bondi, the aftermath brought both professional accolades and personal reflection. In her first interview following the courtroom showdown, she struck a measured tone. This wasn't about me or Judge Jackson. It was about ensuring that our justice system functions as it should. When prosecutors withhold evidence, they're not just breaking rules, they're breaking the foundational trust upon which our entire legal system depends. When asked about facing potential jail time for contempt, Bondi replied, "There are moments in your career when you have to decide what matters most, personal comfort or professional integrity. I knew the risk I was taking, but I also knew what was in those documents." The whistleblower who had provided the crucial documents to Bondi remained anonymous, but their impact was profound. Additional information began to surface, suggesting that the evidence suppression in this case might not have been isolated. 3 other cases handled by the same prosecution team came under review, and within weeks, serious questions were being raised about the handling of those matters as well. Judge Amy Berman Jackson, true to her word, submitted a self-report to the Judicial Conduct Committee. In a rare public statement, she addressed her actions. Judges are human, and humans err. The measure of integrity is not never making mistakes, but how we respond when those mistakes are revealed. The judiciary must hold itself to the same standards it applies to others. The legal community's response to Judge Jackson's self-reporting was largely positive. A judicial ethics expert commented, "Judge Jackson's willingness to acknowledge her error and subject herself to review demonstrates exactly the kind of judicial accountability our system needs. It's actually strengthened her reputation rather than damaged it." 6 weeks after the dramatic hearing, an official review concluded that Judge Jackson had acted appropriately in correcting her initial error and recommended no disciplinary action. The review specifically noted her commitment to transparency and accountability as exemplary judicial conduct. The defendant, now fully exonerated, filed a civil rights lawsuit against the Department of Justice, citing the deliberate misconduct revealed in Bondi's evidence. Legal experts predicted a likely settlement rather than a protracted legal battle that would further expose the department's failures. Perhaps the most significant long-term impact came in the form of judicial reform. The case catalyzed renewed discussions about oversight of prosecutorial conduct and the challenges defense attorneys face when misconduct is suspected, but difficult to prove. Several members of Congress cited the case when introducing legislation to strengthen Brady disclosure requirements and establish more robust remedies for violations. Law schools across the country incorporated the case into their legal ethics curriculum, with one professor noting, "The Bondi-Jackson confrontation perfectly illustrates both the fragility and the resilience of our justice system. It's a powerful reminder to future lawyers that ethical courage sometimes requires personal risk." For ordinary Americans watching the drama unfold, the case offered a rare behind-the-scenes look at the mechanisms of justice, both when they falter and when they correct themselves. Public polling in the months following showed increased awareness of prosecutorial disclosure obligations and broader concern about potential abuses of power within the justice system. 1 year after the courtroom confrontation, Pam Bondi and Judge Amy Berman Jackson appeared together at a judicial conference panel titled "Adversaries in Court, Allies for Justice." Their joint appearance symbolized how 2 strong-willed legal professionals, despite their dramatic courtroom clash, ultimately shared a commitment to the same fundamental principles. What happened in that courtroom was difficult for everyone involved, Judge Jackson acknowledged during the panel. But the outcome, exposing misconduct, preventing an unjust conviction, and prompting systemic review, served justice in the highest sense. Bondi nodded in agreement. The adversarial system works not despite our tensions and conflicts, but often because of them. When we each fulfill our roles with integrity, defense attorneys zealously advocating, judges impartially evaluating, and all parties committed to truth, justice emerges, even if the path there is sometimes dramatic. The case of Judge Amy Berman Jackson and Pam Bondi would be remembered not just for its courtroom drama, but for demonstrating that in America's justice system, even the most powerful can be held accountable when evidence and truth prevail. Thank you for watching this incredible story of justice served. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more powerful accounts of courtroom drama and the ongoing fight for truth in our justice system. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Pam Bondi's position? We'll see you in our next video.